Welcome to Music 239, Intro to World Music. This is the I-course version of this course, which means that the courses are all already recorded and you're watching them either on your iPod or your computer or maybe on a DVD. Because of this, it's very important that you keep up with the work, and the syllabus is designed to help you do that. So we're going to spend a little time going over that syllabus today. There's also the book, 5th edition, Worlds of Music by Titan, that you need to purchase, along with the accompanying set of 4 CDs that goes with that. So make sure you pick that up as well. The syllabus will tell you that there is a Blackboard site for this course, and it's very important that you access the Blackboard site, that you're enrolled in it, because there are materials on there that you need to download, particularly the PowerPoints for each of the chapters. The way this works is if you print out the PowerPoint and use it as you view the lectures, you can take notes on that and it will help organize your materials as you prepare for the tests. So I highly recommend that you do it that way. Now, as you look at the syllabus, you'll find my information. I'm Dr. John Prescott. You'll find my office hours and my office phone number and email there. Please contact me if there are any questions about the course. You'll also be emailing assignments to me as the course goes on, because there are 6 assignments that are handled through email during the course of the semester. So make sure that you know how to get in touch with me. You also need to be able to access the Student Companion site for the textbook, because there are a series of online quizzes that are handled through the textbook publisher's website. And so the Student Companion site information here will tell you how to access that. Make sure that you access the content quiz and not the listening quiz, and make sure that you're choosing the right chapter when we work on these. We don't do the quiz for Chapter 1, but the rest of the chapters, starting with Chapter 2, you will do the online quiz. So make sure that you can access that site. Now, this is a general education course, and so it's important that you know the goals of the course and the objectives, and those are listed on the second page of the syllabus. Each of these goals matches up with a general education goal for the self-understanding category of general education. So if you look on page 2, for example, you'll see that our first goal of our course is to examine what it means to be human through the study of various world musics. And this matches up with the general education goal 1, understanding the nature of our humanness and how human beings are alike and different from other beings with whom they share the planet. So each one of these course goals is lined up with a general education goal. And it's important for you to be aware of those because they relate directly to the assignments and to the final project in this course. Attendance policy, academic integrity policy, non-discrimination policy, all of those are here clearly laid out. Cell phone policy, disability accommodation, all of these are the same as your other university courses. I should say, though, that if you are a student with a disability, please contact me so that proper accommodations can be made. There is also information here on dropping a class, assignments and grades, and the final project. There are online quizzes for chapters 2 through 10, and there is a final project which takes the place of the final exam. You have 2 options in the final project, and those are laid out very clearly in the syllabus. But it's important that no matter what final project you do, you also include a paragraph that's described here in which you describe how the exploration or the performing of world music during the process of creating the project has impacted your own emotional, intellectual, social, and/or creative development. So be aware of that requirement for the final project. 2 options for the final project. Option 1 is a complete musical ethnography. In this case, you will be studying a music culture. Now, what is a music culture? Do you have to be able to go to a foreign country to study a music culture? No, you don't. In fact, a music culture could exist here in Springfield if you go down to the square on a Friday night and visit with one of the bands that plays down there in one of the venues, and get to know those people, interview those people, and take pictures. That could be the music culture that you're studying. A lot of different opportunities for doing these, and we'll talk about these as the course goes on. Option 2 is to learn and perform music in a world music context. So in this case, you will be learning an instrument that you have not played before, or a style in which you have not played before on an instrument, and you'll be writing a paper about your process that you went through in learning that style. So one of 2 options for the final project. The final part of the syllabus shows the proportional breakdown of grades during the course and how they are arrived at. Your progress will be listed on Blackboard, so you can follow your grades there, and you can contact me if you don't see grades that you think you earned, or if there are incorrect values there. Make sure to let me know about that. Also in the syllabus, there is a bibliography showing a wide variety of sources that you can use as you work on your final project. One other thing that I'd like to alert you about is that this course has been filmed over the series of 5 years and with several different manifestations. And so as we go from segment to segment, I will sometimes appear to get younger and then older again. Sometimes I'll change shirts apparently in the middle of class. So just be aware that we had to do that because of filming and because of the amount of time that the course has taken. And so just bear with me on that. So let's press ahead and look at the reading assignment that was due for today. We're going to look at Chapter 1, and we're going to focus on 2 major elements here. What are the 4 components of a music culture? And can you hear and feel the metrical rhythm in the pieces you're listening to? After that, we're going to move on to Chapter 10, which tells us about what type of music you want to learn about. And specifically, what type of music do you want to study for your final project, for either your ethnography or the music that you want to learn to perform? So moving on then, we get into the whole issue of what a music culture is. Basically, a music culture is how some sort of culture creates music for itself. And you think specifically of music from other countries, other lands, right? You think of music from India, or you think of music from Japan, which we will certainly study in this class. But it can go far beyond that. Music cultures can exist within your own communities, and they do. And those are the ones that you're going to have a lot easier access to studying in this class. Because unless you have a whole lot of money, I'm not expecting you to fly to Japan and study a music culture there and come back to write your paper. So in order to study a music culture, you're going to have to do something a little closer to home. There are lots of opportunities for that, and we'll talk about examples, but a music culture can not only be music from another country, but it can also be music in your own backyard. For example, if you are a member of a marching band, there is a music culture associated with that. If you're a member of a church choir, there's a particular music culture associated with that. And studying those particular music cultures can be just as valid as flying to Japan and studying taiko drumming. So be aware of that is a very broad definition of music culture and what constitutes a music culture as we move through this course. So the next question, to get even deeper, is what is music? How do we define music?
And what is a soundscape? Okay, so you see some general definitions up here on the board. The soundscape is basically the music that exists, or the sounds that exist, I should say, in nature or just in a natural environment. This room is a soundscape. For example, if you were very quiet, didn't say anything, can you still hear anything? Anybody hear anything? Buzzing of the lights. Anything else?
Pencils.
Sorry?
Pencils.
People's pencils writing, okay, yeah. Anything else? Cars outside, right? Some traffic noise coming through. All of those elements create the soundscape for this room, over which you hear me talking, you hear occasional people asking questions. So a soundscape is a natural environment of sound. Now, music is slightly different. According to your text, music is sound that is humanly organized. And there is a slight difference. Now, the first two examples on your CD set attempt to allow you to answer questions based on whether they constitute music or not. The first of them, and we're going to listen to just a small segment of this, but I urge you to listen to the whole thing on your own when you leave class today. The first one is a recording that was made back in the 70s by an ethnomusicologist in Ghana who went to mail a letter and heard the postal workers creating a composition by the sounds of the stamps when they canceled the letters. Okay, they made this particular rhythm, and then somebody else started whistling a hymn tune along with it to create the music that you hear on track 1. Go listen to the whole thing when you get a chance, and we're going to come back to that music a little bit later on. But by the definitions that we have up there, does this constitute music? Yes. Now, some people might say, well, it's not really music because they were just using it to pass the time while they worked. But the fact is that by the definition that we have up on the PowerPoint, humanly organized sound, yes, indeed, this does constitute music. Now, listen to track 2, which is a bird. It's a thrush that is singing out in the wild. Is this music by this definition? No. Why not?
It's not humanly organized.
Because it's not humanly organized. Right. You did get a soundscape there, though. It sounds like there's a river flowing or some kind of water flowing in the background, and then the bird singing over the top. But according to the definition that we are given in the text, this is not music. Now, if you took that and you placed it into the confines of a composition that you were writing, then it becomes music. It changes it because a human has organized it. Now, you may or may not agree with that definition, but it allows you to begin to think about the issue. Well, what do you think about that? Do you think that this wood thrush music is not music because it's not humanly organized? Start to think about that. Make those decisions on your own. That's what this course is all about, is to get you to think about music and culture and society in ways that perhaps you have not done before. So sometimes it's not easy to separate sound and music, and opinions are going to differ on how that works from one person to another. Next, we need to talk about patterns in music. All of life is generally made up of patterns in some way, and music is a reflection of that. So you may have seen these definitions before. Certainly, if you've taken a music class previously, either in college or in high school, you've learned about these patterns before. But rhythm and meter is one of the most important patterns in music. Recurring accent pattern. Something keeps happening over and over again. Melody. Principal tune made up of a succession of tones. Okay, a melody. Harmony. Generally consisting of chords that accompany the melody. Form. The structural arrangement of musical ideas. So there might be an A idea, and then a completely different idea, which you could label B, and then maybe it comes back to the A at the end. ABA is a very common form structure in music. So all of these are important musical elements, and we'll be making reference to them as we work through the materials of this course. Now, let's take harmony, which can also be referred to as texture, and look at 4 different types of harmony that we are going to be studying in this course. And much of the music that you study, you can begin to analyze it. You can make some judgments about it based on what the harmonic texture is. And these are the 4 types that you need to know. The monophonic texture is a distinct single melody. Okay, monophonic, just one melody being sung by everybody that's performing. Homophonic texture takes that single melody and it adds an accompanying harmony to it. So there might be a melody being sung or performed over the top, but then there are some chords that are accompanying the monophonic texture. So that becomes homophonic at that point. Polyphonic means that there is more than one melody going on at the same time. Okay? Polyphonic. The term polyphony is used to describe a texture that exists in this style. And finally, heterophonic, which consists of a single melody, but each instrument or voice performs it differently. So in some of the musics that we will study, there is a heterophonic texture going on where the single melody is being performed, but people are not necessarily together, or they're performing it with slight variations. Everybody has a slightly different way of doing it, heterophonic texture. So be aware of these 4 textures as we begin to study this music. The next section, however, is not in the book. So you'll need to rely on your notes and on the PowerPoints to help you remember this information. This is ethnomusicological information. Ethnomusicology is the general term that is used for music study, people who study music of various cultures, ethnomusicology. And the ethnomusicologists have discovered ways of looking at musical instruments, ways of classifying them. It's also known as the Sachs-Hornbostel instrument classification system. Okay? The Idiophone group is made up of instruments that have a vibration without strings or membranes. So if the instrument makes its sound by vibrating, but there's no string and there's no membrane involved. It's an idiophone. Examples include bells, instruments played with mallets, percussion instruments that are played with mallets, such as a xylophone, marimba. Those kinds of instruments are all idiophones, and all bells fall into this category as well. Second category is membranophones. These are instruments that have some kind of a membrane. All drums fall into this category. Membranophones. Third category, chordophones. These are strings. Okay. Instruments that are create their sound through the use of a vibrating string are chordophones. Aerophones, instruments that are consist of an air column. So all wind instruments, brass instruments, they all fall into the aerophone category. And one more in parentheses, because we won't really be studying it in this class, but it is part of the system, is the electrophone, anything that is created by the use of electrical impulses, such as a synthesizer. Not really part of this course, and that's why it's in parentheses. The top four are the ones that you really need to know as you begin to work through the materials in this class. Now, the lines between these instruments are not always easy to draw. Okay? There are some hybrids that fall into more than one category. For example, the tambourine falls into two categories because it has the membrane, which you strike in order to get the sound, but a tambourine also has little jingling bells around the outside, right? If you've played a tambourine before, you've played it and then the bells jingle, so what category is that? Idiophones, right, because you have a bell vibrating and you also have the membrane. So you have actually two different categories. They are membranophone and idiophone. Okay? What about the kazoo? How does that fall into two categories? Ariel, what do you think?
It's a column of air, but it's striking a membrane.
Okay. Are you striking a membrane?
No, sort of. Your airwaves are striking the membrane.
Yeah, okay. Because a kazoo has a little piece of paper inside it that vibrates, right? So you're using an air column to make the sound, but the sound is being modified by the little vibrating piece of paper, which is a membrane. So you have a combination, in this case, a hybrid of the aerophone and the membranophone. So we're going to run into several categories of instruments that are hybrids like this and fall into more than one category. As we study these instruments, you're going to find a greater interest now in insider's words, context, and style. That means that getting inside the music culture that you're studying can be a very important thing. More about that in the next chapter as we get into chapter 10 of this book. Okay, now let's get back to ethnomusicology and back to our textbook. These four ideas come from the text. It is ways of looking at the cultural elements that surround and give meaning to music. Okay? And there are four components of a music culture. You will find this in chapter 1. You'll find a lot more detail on it. So when you read chapter 1, you'll find this. This information is good organizational structure for essays that you might write in this class on tests, and also for your paper. Okay? These are excellent categories to know about. Because as we study different cultures of music, we will look at ideas about music, activities involving music, repertories of music, and the material culture of music. Now, what are these four things? Right? What exactly does that mean? Well, in your text, as you read it, you will find that the ideas about music are broken down into four subcategories. So you can write this in outline form. It'll be real easy to study this information for tests that might come up in this class. Music in the belief system is essentially the role of religion with music. Okay? And no matter what religion you are associated with, or if you're not a religious person, you are aware at least of the fact that music and religion are inexorably tied together. And you know that from not only from our own culture, but also as we look at cultures throughout the world, many of them very ancient cultures, you will find that the role of religion on music is very, very important. Aesthetics in music. Essentially, is the music beautiful, and do you like it? And ultimately, that comes down to a matter of personal opinion. Thing about music is that it is a very personal art, and everyone has his or her own favorite music that they like to listen to, and very strong opinions typically about music that they don't like to listen to. My son, for example, was listening to one of the CDs from your text and heard Bosnian folk music being performed. And when you hear it, you'll understand what his reaction was. It was like, that's the worst thing I have ever heard. Okay, well, it's just because in their culture, they don't have the same kind of ideas of consonance and dissonance that we have in our culture. And so while it might sound to us like the worst thing we've ever heard, in their culture, it sounds beautiful. It's a matter of opinion. Context for music, okay? Context for music are very important. Why was this music written? What was the context behind its creation? In general, our society tends to consume music rather than creating it. Okay? More and more, you watch people who say they like music means that they own an iPod and they walk around campus listening to it. They like music. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that they create music or that they perform it. Other cultures are not like that. And as we look, for example, at the Indonesian cultures of Bali and Java, we will find that these islands, which have millions of people on these small islands, okay, in Indonesia, virtually everyone is involved in making art, whether it's being a member of a shadow puppet theater or visual art or creating music. Virtually everyone in the culture is part of the art. Okay? In another example, I went to hear a Mennonite hymn sing here in the Ozarks some time back and found that everybody in this congregation knew how to sing, and they knew how to read music and sing parts. Okay? I can't say that for the whole culture, but in this Mennonite community, they were brought up learning to read music and sight sing. An unusual thing in our culture. Finally, the history of music is very important in any ideas about music. Okay? Music cultures hardly ever stay the same. They're constantly evolving. So it's important to know about their history in order to understand their present. And most of the cultures that we're going to study are some kind of a hybrid, an overlapping of the music that has been around historically for a long period of time and music that has been imported from outside. And there is a combination effect going on. And that's one of the things that we'll study as we continue working through this course. Section 2, activities involving music. Okay, first of all, basic aspects of social organization. You will find as we study these cultures that music is used to define the organization of societies. For example, jazz music was considered to be beneath the university in the 1950s. Okay, back in the 1950s, when many of the great jazz artists that we hear today were in their heyday, you could not study jazz at a university because it was considered beneath a music department at a university to be studying this style of music. Now, 50 years later, 60 years later, okay, you can get a degree in jazz studies. Things change. The basic organizations of society have to do with music in some cases. The status and role, okay? What is a person's status, their role in the community because they are a musician? And that's going to change from one society to another. There are different music cultures for virtually every kind of instrument that exists. And the culture of a string player in a symphony orchestra is completely different than the culture of the brass players in the same orchestra. Okay? Completely different culture. What is the status of the person that is a musician in their society? Jazz musicians find themselves sometimes having to come in by the back door, right? When they're coming into a gig somewhere, they don't want them coming in the front with the other guests, with the people who paid. They want them coming in the back so nobody sees them. Okay? That's how sometimes musicians are treated in that particular culture. But there are cultures where the musician, the performers, are the most revered people in the entire community. You'll see that in some African communities, for example, the Lunsi drummers that we're going to study from Ghana, where the drummers are the most important people in the entire community. So that is going to change from culture to culture. The next category, repertories of music, is pretty well laid out in your text and on the PowerPoint. Okay? You will see descriptions in your text on this, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going over this for you right now. All of this material is fairly easy to understand. Material culture of music, however, Section 4 produces some very important artifacts. And artifacts are how we study a music culture, particularly cultures that are thousands of years old, in some cases with what they have left behind. So what do we have left behind? Well, we have musical instruments, first of all, some of which are in museums and are the original versions, and some of which are reproductions. We're going to see a lot of musical instruments in this class. And in some cases, I'll be bringing them in. In some cases, we will be making instruments. In some cases, we will be putting instruments together. These are all the artifacts of the material culture of music. From this, you also will see paintings, documents, art, scores, books, sheet music, okay, various kinds of mass media. The impact of mass media on this music cannot be understated. Okay, the music will change so much when mass media starts to come about. One of the things that we'll look at when we study music of the Ozarks region is a fellow named Max Hunter, who went around collecting folk songs back in the 1950s to the 1970s. And there's a website here that has a number of his songs that he collected on it, about 1,600 of them. One of the things that Max was very, very determined about is that if he felt that the singers had been influenced from the outside by listening to the radio, watching the TV, then he didn't use their songs because he didn't feel that they represented the true flow of history in the traditional music of the Ozarks. He felt that they had been changed somewhat by bringing them in. We'll see many cultures where the music has clearly been changed by the use of mass media. When we look at Indonesia, for example, and we see the Indonesian jazz fusion created by combining gamelan music with jazz music instruments. There's a lot of very interesting things that happen. But as people who study music, we have to be very careful about making sure that we're aware that the influence of mass media has, in fact, occurred. Okay. Let's move on to some general principles of world music. We're going to actually study this in our next session. Okay, general principles of world music. You will You will see this in your PowerPoint and also in the book. Music cultures are dynamic rather than static. Music hardly ever dies out. Okay? So it gets overlaid with other types of music. Music is also used as a controlling force. Particularly in religious and political uses, we will see that significantly as we work through this course. Ethnocentrism, generally not a positive element. Okay? Not only to say, well, our music is better than the music of this culture, the music of my culture is better than the music of this culture because it's mine. It's not generally a good principle. The other thing to think about is the type of music I like is the best type, okay, because I like it. Or the first version of this piece I heard is the best one. That's ethnocentricity. Think about that. Try to avoid that kind of principle. Next time we'll start to look at some scale forms that we will be studying as we work through this course. And we will see you all then. Thank you very much for your attention today.